What job should marketing get done in a company?
I think first and foremost, marketing's role is to get people to like the company. If you think about it, you're never going to buy anything that you don't genuinely like. And I think that's a step we forget. And I think that that is squarely in the purview of marketing.
That's the Jess Cook. And if you've listened to an episode with Lachey Lewis on our podcast, you have heard her name before. She's a bit of an icon legend in this space. She started her career over 20 years ago doing copywriting for some of the best B2C brands. And then about 5-ish years ago, jumped ship over to the B2B SaaS land and has ever since evolved into her head of marketing role currently with Vector. She has a podcast that I'd highly recommend checking out. We talk a bit about that throughout this episode. And if you want to create better content that builds community and leads to better marketing, you need to listen to and study Jess. I hope you enjoy our conversation, but before we get back to it, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show where we uncover what marketing is. I won't tell you what to think, I'll help you improve how you think about marketing and life. I'm Jordan Ogret, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. This was originally recorded on November 14th, 2025. All opinions shared in this podcast are individual views of the hosts and guests, not those of their employers or associate organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional marketing or life guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here.
We tend to put our dollars where our values are aligned or where the product is so great that even if our values aren't just quite aligned, we can overlook that. But I think that there is so much value in just being likable. And that doesn't have to mean funny. It doesn't have to mean approachable even, right? I mean, I think if you look at some of the B2B brands out there that play it more on kind of the professional but like smartest person in the room type voice and tone, that's very likable to their audience, right? I think of Island, where I was at before, where I am now at Vector. And that was kind of our ethos, was like, let's be the smartest person in the room. And IT teams and security leaders, they really appreciate that. And that is what helped them like Island before deciding to buy Island, right? So I think first and foremost, it's like get people to like you, whatever that means.
That's a unique answer. I've yet to hear that on the pod, but it aligns a lot with my thoughts around people buy from people they like and all of these things, even in B2B. And a word that came to my mind is affinity. That isn't the same as liking, but I think liking is the first step towards an affinity. And that was like years ago, I heard from Wistia, this kind of challenge or dichotomy of like brand awareness, brand affinity. What are you focusing on? It seems that your likeness leads to that affinity versus just trying to be known by everyone or just trying to be known, but you're trying to understand how can we, a unique company, be known by a unique audience. And that is the way that you're talking about. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's funny. The way you're doing it at Vector is probably different than how you might do it somewhere else. So I love that kind of, the context is really important, but the liking, getting them to like you as like a North Star. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it means that you have to know your audience, right? Like you have to know, what does this audience even like? How do we become likable for them? And I think so that's definitely the first place to start before you're building what that brand even looks like.
Yeah, so that isn't to me an intuitive thought. What got you to this likeness? Was it a series of things? Was it, I tried this pathway and it didn't work, and I think building for likeness is just a better path? What brought that realization to you?
I have a background in B2C. So I was a copywriter and creative director on Kellogg and Kimberly-Clark and Blue Cross and all kinds of national brands before making the leap to B2B. And so I think that's just kind of in my nature as I came up as a writer and writing not around features and benefits, not around, what are the specs of a cereal or a toilet paper roll, right? It's completely different. You're writing for emotion, you're writing for relevance, for kind of a universal truth of some kind, an aha moment. And so I think it really just stems from that. Like, how can we be more like that in B2B and just get someone to like us first, because they're not going to consider us if they don't like us.
That makes a lot of sense. I wonder sometimes, your point's so valid, where with products or with B2C, sometimes you hit this aspirational place. It's like, buy this cereal and all of a sudden your family will be a very happy family. And it's like, man, that job to be done just doesn't logically make sense. But to your point, it gets people emotionally. But then B2B, I hear Anthony, I'm going to butcher his last name, where he'll tear people down when they are too aspirational. Like, change your entire company with this product. And it's like, no, you'll just do quicker taxes or something like that. How do you balance then this level of aspiration? You need to touch those heartstrings, but then also being like, it needs to be rooted in actual job to be done or some progress that ideal customer wants, which pairs to what you said of like, you need to know who you're trying to reach, because then you're speaking to their aspirations rather than just a generic aspirational goal. Or can you touch a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So again, I think this comes back to audience, right? So Anthony Pieri is who you're talking about. And
Yes. Thank you.
we just went at Vector through an entire repositioning project, and we worked with Anthony and the team at Fletch on our homepage. And he is really good at getting to just like, but what's the thing you do, right? That one thing. And so, that works perfectly for the homepage, right? Where it's kind of the front door to the business. You need to be tied to like a word or a phrase or a thing that you do, right? So that people can kind of understand that. And position you in their minds against other things in that realm or not in that realm, to like, oh, it's not this, it's this. But an investor needs a very different story, right? So while our homepage may say the only way to build ad audiences by name, an investor wants to know that we are disrupting the way that people target their audiences with ads, right? And so I think again, you kind of have to understand the altitude at which you're speaking. And I love your thought of like, sometimes you'll see, I actually think even one of the evening television like hosts did kind of a spoof on this, where it was like, it ended up being an Oreo commercial, but it was like, it was the cookie that was like bringing an estranged like dad and daughter back together. And at the end it was like Oreo, right? And everyone was like, what? Like sometimes even B2C takes it a little too far. So yeah, I think you have to figure out like, who's the audience, what realistically can we kind of glom onto and get people to be like, yeah, that's kind of what that brand is about. And not question like, oh, did they overstep a little bit there? That's a little much.
I love that, because it's very intuitive for people. When I speak to certain individuals, I have a different way that I present myself, or a different way that I maybe sell, where with a marketer, I can be a bit more nuanced of the exact things in marketing I do. So much that it's like with people, speak to who you're talking to dictates maybe what you say, and the better you understand them, the better you can contextualize the message for them. I love that. That makes a lot of sense. What is something, Jess, that you're talking really loud about right now, but you don't hear as many marketers maybe talking as loud about it, or talking in a way that you're talking about this thing? Does anything come to your mind that you're kind of loud about, obsessing over right now?
I think a lot of what we're talking about, even just you and I right here, that I've been thinking about lately, is this idea of an awareness magnet. So I think we hear a lot about lead magnets, right? What's a little tool or a download or some sort of guide that I can create? Someone's going to be willing to put their email and contact information, and I can put them into my, sales, my email nurture, and pass them off to sales, right? I'm very bullish, and going into 2026, leaning into awareness magnets. What are the things that are just going to get people to know who the heck we are, like us, and want to learn more? I don't think we spend enough time on things like that, or the idea of just wanting to kind of bring someone in, even just a little bit. And so something, an example of that we're going to be doing in 2026 is we're going to be, we created a Instagram handle for our podcast. And so the podcast is called This Meeting Could Have Been a Podcast. It's myself and my CEO, and essentially each episode it feels like you're sitting down in one of our one-on-ones and we're discussing kind of one topic, right? So the second season just started, and the first episode was called Jess Wants a Real Marketing Budget. And so we just talked through like, how did I even approach that? How did I even build the budget? How did I sell it in? What was their reaction? What did I get? What did I ask for? And what did I actually get? And it's taken on kind of a life of its own. People really like the relationship between myself and my CEO, Josh. We have a great relationship. He really understands marketing. And so I think it's helpful for people who maybe don't have that relationship with their CEO to understand, like, how can I ask for something like this? How could I build a budget? How could I start an influencer pilot program? Right? All the things that we are trying to sell into our CEO. Like, how could I go about doing that? And so we're going to be investing more in that podcast, specifically in distribution. So we've created an Instagram handle. We're going to be kind of pushing that out just as the podcast itself, and not really any mention of Vector, what Vector does, just to get more people to be like, what is this podcast? Who are these people? Oh, okay. It's from a company. And what do they do? Right? So awareness magnet. I think that is going to be whether we call it that or not. That's just kind of what I'm calling it in my brain, but feels like something that could really blow up in the next year or so.
I love that. Before I ask questions on that, I do want to note that you all, regardless of what you have planned, I feel like you've done a great job of you have this like 3-image comic book style, like just things that it's like, it's gotten me to be interested or curious, to your point, more aware of the ghost and the vector and all these things being together, and like even the relationship you have. And sometimes you went of like more tactical. I take it sometimes as like therapeutic of like, oh great, it's good to know that this is out there somewhere.
Yeah,
and like
totally.
I can maybe get there one day. But then using some of the things, which I find the conversation you and Josh have is super fun. Just to your point, it's like that one-on-one, which I find is interesting. But back to the awareness versus lead gen, like what is maybe one of the most stark differences you could kind of share that would make someone really understand where lead gen is maybe focused on this, where the awareness thing could be more focused on this? You talked about it, but I'd love just like for someone a really clear way to know, like, oh, that would be more lead gen, this would be awareness generation play.
Yeah, I think it's like another step removed from the product itself, right? So on the podcast, it's like the whole thing is about me and Josh and what problem or decision we're tackling at the moment. And we talk about Vector a little bit here and there, in that we're building this product launch came up, and how did we actually launch the product? But we're not selling the product in the show. We're selling like the relationship between marketing leader and CEO, and how do you navigate that? And so I think it's like, the closer you get to the product, the closer you get to something that's more going to generate a lead that may be actually closer to buying, right, than someone who's just interested in the podcast because it's interesting, it's therapeutic, I get some tactical information out of it, and maybe I'm not quite ready to buy. So I think it to me, it boils down to like the degree away from, 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon, almost, if you want to think of it like that. Like, are you 6 degrees away from the product? Are you 2, right? And so I think that's kind of the scale to look at it on.
And I can imagine there has to be some ability of like, or balance, I should say, where I know Gary Vee, way back in the day when I used to be more in his orbit, talked about just create content around things you're interested in. I'm like, that'd be interesting if it was a podcast on like Star Wars Legos, but you're selling a vector. So I do think, to your point, you have to be removed, but maybe it's 4 points removed, and 5 is like too far, where then it's just like, what the heck are we talking about comic books? And it's like a marketing automation software. I mean, it could bring people in, and it touches on the likeness. Someone likes comic books, they're in your world, and then when they're ready to buy, which is the statistics, how many people are ready to buy at the moment, so you want to be on their short list, all of those things. But I wonder, how do you think about that, of going too far? Or is it just like you've done it so many times, you've done enough shows that it just becomes natural of like, this is a sweet spot, we know our audience, we know what they're thinking about, and this is removed enough but not too far removed? I
think that's a great point. Yeah, we would never do a show about Star Wars or, and my like obsession with true crime, like it's too far removed, right? Like I'm not going to be able to tell if there's enough overlap in my audience and that topic. And I may get lucky and there may be, right? But I think you have to again, think about the audience. Like, what's broad enough and umbrella-ish enough that you can still talk to the audience at a high level, again, that altitude, but you know that like they're squarely in your audience, like the Venn diagram of the people listening to the podcast and the Venn diagram of people who could eventually buy Vector, the overlap is very large, right? So I think you have to kind of think about that a little bit.
That makes sense. I like the overlap, which I think I've seen from Ann Hanley. Like the best content is that overlap of the circle, what you're interested in, what they're interested in, which a little bit different what you're talking about. But I think overlap, that mindset is like, where is there overlap? And can we actually validate that there's some there versus kind of just making a hypothesis and then it doesn't land? That makes sense. One final question on the marketing front. With you being a new job, I listened to that recent episode and it talks about like the marketing budget that took time to get to, but I'd love for you to just talk to Jess before she starts a new role. And you've done this maybe a few times, but like, what are things you know now in your current role that you would tell earlier Jess of like, do this in your first 6 weeks, do this in your first 3 months, or don't do this in your first 3 months, do this, because there's so much around low hanging fruit, high hanging fruit. I'm kind of a part of the group where I don't like to touch the website. Some people do like to touch the website right away. It's a low hanging fruit, but is it going to be like the highest value? How do you think about that? And like, what is your thought process, mental model playbook when you come into a new organization? You talked about on the episode about learning and some of those things, so you can reiterate that, but I'd love to just hear do's and don'ts being in a new marketing leadership role.
I love being able to ship something early, first week. And it can be, something simple, a blog post, a social post, like the things that you learned your first weekend, right? So I love being able to ship something. I did touch the website in my first week. I added a call to action button where we really needed one and didn't have one. And it's again, low hanging fruit, right? Yeah. But I think you also then have to balance that with like, what's the long-term stuff that you really need to be digging into those first few weeks and figuring out who's who and who should I partner with on this. And, okay, all right, I see kind of a gap here. And like, I'm going to remember that as I start to build the strategy that's something we need to fill. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in being able to be like, hey, this is a thing I did week one. You may go back and realize 6 weeks later, it was not the right thing to do. I think that's okay. It's funny, the button that I shipped that first week was to encourage a free trial. We just recently moved away from, sorry, not a free trial, to sign up for free. We had a fully like free version of the product. We just recently took that away and swapped it out for a free 14-day trial, right? And so like going back to that first week, if I could have seen like, hey, 6 months down the road, this isn't even going to be a thing anymore. I don't know. I don't know if I would have done anything different, right? Because you kind of have to put the button on the site to see if people click it, to see if people dive into the product, and what problems arise when you have a free version of the product and a paid version of the product, and the people using the free and the people using the paid are vastly different, right? Like we wouldn't have known that. So it was great to learn, and it's okay that like if the thing that you do in those first few weeks, like you end up having to go undo later. It's all a giant experiment, this marketing thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a whole other podcast, right? The freemium, and is that valid? And maybe that time that ship has not passed, but it's more selective of who it really is valuable for. I'm not in that world, but it's curious to me because it seemed like a great play, freemium, get them in your product. But your point's very valid. You might get people who are hiring it for different jobs or different progress than your intended. I love, though, that you talked about shipping right away, because while I might have said that on the website, I do think there's also this level of like waiting too long. If you had to go to one pole of waiting too long or acting too soon, I'd rather act too soon in the sense that you can, unless it's a one-way door, as Jeff Bezos calls it, like you can always come back through to your point of removing the button. I see it being the whole site redo, or because that's a bit more of a one-way door of like, once we start this whole resite or redoing the website, and is that like the best action, to your point, to ship right away? So I really like that ship quickly, because then you also can get intel of like, how is the process of getting things shipped? Because I've been in environments where there's so many reviews over a social post or over even my own bio. And then I've been in others where it's like, yeah, that looks great, ship it. And it's like, oh, cool. Okay, now I know the vibe here is like,
point. You kind of get a sense of what you got yourself into. And if you need to try and fix it or not. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. All right, Jess, I could probably talk to you forever about marketing, so I'd love to get more to life, maybe more serious, the more meaningful topic. So for you personally, Jess, because I know you can't answer for everybody, but for you, what is the job of life? What are you hiring life to do? So at the end, you can say, hey, it was successful because of X. Like, what's the point of your life or life in general, but for you?
For me, it's about using my time and the talents that I've been given, and um, the empathy that I have been given to like help others, be there for others. One of my favorite things to do is this, right? Meet other marketers, talk through problems. Um, I get people that reach out to me on LinkedIn and they're like, I heard the podcast about the budget. I'm putting my first one together. Like, would you be willing to sit down with me for 15 minutes and just talk through it? And I'm like, yes, let's do it. Like, I love doing those kinds of things. That's how I met Lachey Lewis, who I know has been a guest on the show before. She reached out to me and was just like, hey, I just would love to talk to you. I just love what you're doing. And we've been friends ever since. Like, that's huge. The number of people that I've met on LinkedIn and through this role and just putting myself out there, like the ability to get to touch those lives, and for them, like they have touched my life as well. There's so many people out there like that. And so I don't know, that feels like a big privilege to be able to do these kinds of things, talk to people, learn from people, help each other.
Did you always have that as maybe your North Star, or was there a point in your life where your North Star was something different and then it shifted to more of this helping, not altruistic in a sense, but just picking others up and using the skills and talents? Was that always your mindset when you were a 12-year-old girl, when you were in high school, or was it a shift as you have moved in your career or different things that then it's like, oh, of course, this is the second half. It's time to give back. I took and now I give. Or how do you think about that shift in your mind? Or have you always been there of like helping, serving is the point of life?
I have always felt helping and serving is the point of life. I think the desire to do it more often has grown as I have grown and my confidence has grown, right? I think when you're young, you think about like, well, who am I to have an opinion, right? I've done very little in this world. And I think as you grow and you age, even when I started posting on LinkedIn a few years back, I was still kind of like, I don't know, I'm not an expert. Like I feel like I could do this. And I think maybe if I would have been able to follow somebody that was sharing the things I think I want to talk about, like, I think it would have been really helpful, even just like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Right. And so that was the big impetus of that for me, was just like, man, if I could help one person who's 2 years behind me, think of something differently that helps them grow in their career, like that's worth it right there. So I think, as I continued to do that, I got more confident about doing it. People would approach me and say that it had helped them. And so then it was like, well, I can't stop doing this now. I need to help more, right? And so I think that has grown for me as I have grown and aged and moved up in my career.
I love that. It is a bit of I don't want to say addicting because that's the wrong word, but there is dopamine in being selfishly selfless that I know by helping another. Recently, 5 years ago, I got let go from a job. It was on a Friday and I knew someone from my church was moving, but I obviously was thinking I was going to be working, so I couldn't help. And it was very quickly, I was reading a book and the book talked about active love as being this way to get out of depression in this places where when you're in a dark place, force your energy actively loving another human. So I said, well, I'm going to selfishly go and help this person because A, I won't be thinking about my problems, and B, I know after I help someone, the dopamine's up and I feel better. So I love that it's kind of this like, if you're able to realize it, it's a bit of like a hack of like, if I want to feel better, helping. But after listening to a podcast, I realized that is a value of mine, and not everybody has the same value. Where a virtue could be kindness. We can all agree that kindness is a socially construct that we should all do, kindness. But helping another when you have a kid and you have all these things going is more of a value. It's not something we would, if someone didn't do, we would criticize them for. But if someone has that value, I look at them and I'm like, oh, you should just be helping. So clearly you have that as a value. what is a virtue that you find, and maybe you've touched on it, but like what's a virtue that helps you through that, or a virtue that you use within your helping that is something that you've grown in, or you believe is something that we should, as humans, myself more so, increase in that virtue, whether it be kindness, empathy, do any of those come to your mind of like, oh, that helps me help others, or it increases my capacity?
A lot of it has to do with, I have two girls, 12 and 6. And my mom worked full time when I was a kid. And there's something about like watching your mother like work and, then also take care of you and also do the things around the house that needs to be done and also come to the parties and also come to your Girl Scout thing and make sure they're there to help you with homework, right? Like there's something about that for me that I wouldn't even know what virtue to call that, Jordan, but there's something about that for me to see that like you can really enjoy work and you can also really be there for your family. And I think just modeling that for my girls is something that feels really important to me. I also want them to see me helping others through my work, through my posting on LinkedIn, through what I'm doing on podcasts like this. So that also feels really important to me. I don't know what I would name that. But I know it was really important, especially now as myself as a mom looking back and realizing all the things my mom did and sacrificed for me and all the time she spent. She had to be at work, and then she also made sure she was always there for me and my brother.
Parenthood, whatever we want to call it, can definitely open you to things at which you hadn't thought of before, you just couldn't have thought of. I have almost a 12-month-old, and I've had many thoughts around so I've had a lot of these conversations on the podcast, and a lot of times people talk about the purpose of life is family. It's people that you love. And I struggle with that because coming from a great family, I've had an ability to almost look in the fact that sometimes a great family can be an inhibitor because there's somebody without a great family that if we all focus only on our family, nobody's focusing on them. So I've said, I want my daughter not to just love big because I've loved her big, but I want her to see me love another child, another person, another thing as much as I love her. And for her to see like, A, that's okay, and B, wow, like that's what love is for. We don't have to keep it in. We have an unlimited amount. So it aligns so much with yours. You're further along. So you've had more of those balancing and trying to do both work and be that model. But I align so much with that of like, I want my child or children to see me in the world helping others. So then this cycle of contributing and giving back isn't kind of broken because I can't tell them. They will model what they see. And if I'm not helping others, it would be hard for them to logically get there. They would have to see someone else, another mentor in their life. So I love that.
Yeah.
And yeah, what virtue is that? I'm not sure. Modeling the way, I guess.
We need to give that a name. I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, I love that. All right, Jess, final question here, because I think similarly with marketing, I could talk on life forever. There's this movie called Inception. If you haven't watched it, a quick synopsis is they go into people's dreams to incept ideas. Usually they're malicious, sell your company, give me an X stake in it. So then the next day that person wakes up, that dream that they had that was incepted is their own. So they act out of that as if that was my dream. I want you, more benevolent, to incept an idea in the mind of every human, not just marketers. So tomorrow we all wake up in the idea you incept, I live out of, in the whole world then is different because of this idea, because we're all living out of that. What idea do you incept in the mind of every human? Just a little pressure.
Oh, okay. Give me 20 seconds. I would like to incept saying yes to the things that make you feel a little excited and a little nervous more often, because that's usually an indicator of some kind of turning point, a moment where you're going to be challenged, but it's going to be really exciting. And that could be a new role at work. It could be helping someone that you were maybe hesitant to help, but you just feel this pull that you kind of need to. It could be, a number of things, right? A lot of things that I've encountered have made me feel like that could be amazing, but what if it doesn't go right? And so I think saying yes to those moments more often is what I would accept in everyone, because I think that's usually where like the best of us comes out.
I love that. And I'm going to take it a bit highest level of just saying yes and to everything, whether that's through a lesson of improv and I learned that through leadership, that improv is all about yes and. You can't be like, no, you said that wrong, which is kind of like life is it's accepting things as they come, saying yes, because like saying no, at least in my vantage point, to life's happenings just gets me into a negative state where the quicker I can get to acceptance, which is a very active state where I always thought it was very passive, but just like accepting more things and moving forward. But I also love the literal tactical of just like, if it scares you a bit, but you're also excited, like say yes. And I call those liminal spaces. It's a space most people hate, from A to B, and you're not at B yet, and you're definitely no longer at A. You're in this liminal space, and I find that to be sometimes where I'm excited, but I'm also very nervous. The what ifs can go all sorts of ways. What if this turns great? What if this blows up? All of those where it's just like lean into the yes and keep like seeking more and accepting things as they come is kind of where I'm taking your on the ground insight to like this highest level of like just be more open to life's happenings and say yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I have two more points to make there. One is the reason I feel so strongly about this. When I was in college, I majored in advertising and Spanish, and I never studied abroad, and the opportunity was brought up to me, and I had the means to do it, and I didn't go. And that's always something that's bothered me, that I wish I would have gone just for a semester. And so yeah, I don't know. I think that's why it feels so strongly to me. The other thing is to make sure that like that feeling, the excitement and the nervousness, the excitement has to be there. There are some times where your mind and your body is telling you like, I'm only nervous about this. There's not really any excitement to me, right? And that is like a sign to be like, maybe it's not for me. But I think if you even feel an inkling of excitement, you need to give it some thought and some time.
I think we regret more of the things we don't do. I thought I've read that somewhere. So that aligns with yours. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, yeah, we could probably go forever on kind of just the pros that can come from saying yes while there's energy, while there's some excitement, because I do agree with you, the body keeps a score. And if it's telling you bad environment, don't keep saying yes to an abusive or to a negative. So I think with all things, marketing in general, it depends. There's context involved, but most times saying yes to help that person, saying yes when it's like, I wish I could just crash out and watch some Netflix tonight, but my friend is in town. Let me do it, because as you noted with the Spanish thing, we will likely regret the things we don't do versus being like, I'm angry I went out and had a few drinks and enjoyed myself. But I love it. Well, thank you, Jess, so much for coming on and just sharing your wisdom. I've learned a lot, and I hope the 2 to 3 listeners have also picked up a couple things. So thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much. This was a great, very, very deep chat, very different than any other I've been on, which I love. It's great.
Yeah, that's a problem of mine. I always go deep. But again, yes, thank you for coming on. And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post it on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.